The cruel stepmother wanted nothing more than to humiliate her stepdaughter, forcing her into an engagement with a penniless man. But on the wedding day, a shocking revelation left everyone in fear. Under the blazing sun of New York City, the pavement radiated heat as life bustled along Fifth Avenue. Among the sea of people, a young man named Ethan sat on the sidewalk, his once bright blue eyes now dulled by exhaustion and hunger. His clothes were torn, his body thin from weeks of barely eating. He watched the fast-paced world around him, feeling invisible. His stomach groaned loudly, a painful reminder that he hadn't eaten in 2 days. He muttered to himself, trying to cling to a shred of hope. Just one more day, Ethan. Someone will notice you today. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one looked twice at a beggar. The hours dragged by as he battled the urge to dig through nearby trash cans. He had promised himself he would never stoop that low, but hunger was an unrelenting enemy. The scent of food from a nearby vendor tormented him, making his stomach tighten in protest. His mind drifted to the past, to the life he wished he had, a home, a family, a place where he belonged. As the day stretched on, he observed others like him, asking passers-by for spare change. But pride, the last thing he still had, kept him from doing the same. An older man sitting nearby gave him a knowing look. "Kid, sometimes it feels hopeless, but we survive," he said, his voice worn by time and hardship. Ethan sighed. "I know, but will things ever change? A few coins from kind people help for a moment, but we need more than that. We need real chances, jobs, housing, and a way to get out of this." His voice wavered between hope and doubt. Then, as if the universe had heard his silent plea, a middle-aged woman stopped in front of him. Without a word, she handed him a paper bag, the warmth of it seeping through his fingers. The rich aroma of fresh bread and roasted meat filled his senses, making his mouth water. He looked up, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. You have no idea how much this means to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The woman simply smiled and walked away, leaving Ethan in awe of the kindness he had just received. Maybe there's still good in the world. Maybe I'm not completely alone. As he prepared to take his first bite, he noticed 2 other men nearby, their gaunt faces reflecting his own struggles. Without hesitation, he tore the sandwich into 3 pieces and offered them a share. "Here, guys, no one should go hungry when we can help each other," he said, his voice hoarse but sincere. Across the street, 2 women observed the scene. Olivia, a young woman with warm green eyes and long brown hair, felt her heart ache at the sight of Ethan's selflessness. She took a step forward, ready to offer more help, when a sharp grip on her arm stopped her. Her stepmother, Victoria, a woman with sharp features and a cold gaze, held her firmly. "Don't even think about it, Olivia. I won't allow you to associate with those people," she hissed, her gray eyes flashing with disapproval. "But they need help. How can we just walk away?" Olivia protested, her voice thick with emotion. Victoria tightened her grip and pulled Olivia toward a luxury boutique. Her heels clicked against the pavement, a stark contrast to the desperate scene they had just left behind. Olivia resisted, her eyes lingering on Ethan and his companions, her heart heavy with the injustice of it all. Victoria suddenly stopped, spinning on her heels to face her stepdaughter. Her expression twisted into a mix of disgust and restrained fury. "Have you lost your mind, Olivia? These people are dangerous. Any money you give them will probably be spent on drugs or alcohol," she hissed, her tone sharp. "You don't know that, Victoria. That man just shared the only meal he probably had today. How can you be so heartless?" Olivia shot back, her voice shaking with frustration. Their argument began drawing attention from nearby pedestrians. Olivia, usually reserved, felt a newfound courage stirring inside her. She yanked her arm free from Victoria's grip and took a determined step toward the street. "They're human beings, Victoria. They deserve kindness, not judgment," Olivia declared, her voice gaining strength. Victoria's hand shot out again, gripping Olivia's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her skin. "You don't understand how the world works, dear. These people chose this life. It's not our responsibility to fix their mistakes," Victoria said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Chose?" Olivia's eyes burned with disbelief. "No one chooses to go hungry or sleep on the streets. How can you be so blind?" Tears welled in her eyes, fueled by a mix of sadness and anger. Before Victoria could tighten her grip, Olivia broke free. Without hesitation, she hurried across the street, her heart pounding as she approached Ethan and his companions. With trembling hands, she reached into her purse and pulled out some cash. "Please, take this. I hope it helps in some way," she said softly, extending the money toward Ethan. Ethan looked at her, startled by the unexpected kindness. For a moment, their eyes met, an unspoken connection passing between them. "Thank you, miss. Your kindness means more than you can imagine," Ethan murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's nothing, really. I just wish I could do more," Olivia replied, feeling both relieved and helpless at the same time. From across the street, Victoria watched the scene unfold. Her face was tight with fury, but beneath the anger, there was something else: calculation. Her gray eyes narrowed as they lingered on Ethan. There was something about him, something beyond his ragged appearance. A plan began to take shape in her mind, one that could serve multiple purposes. When Olivia returned to Victoria's side, she braced herself for the inevitable outburst. But to her surprise, Victoria didn't shout or scold her. Instead, a slow, cold smile crept across her lips. "Since you're so eager to help those people, perhaps I should teach you a lesson about them," Victoria said, her voice laced with sarcasm. Olivia's stomach twisted with unease. "What are you planning, Victoria?" she asked, suddenly wary of her stepmother's shift in demeanor. Victoria didn't answer. As they walked away, she cast one last glance at Ethan, her mind working swiftly. Olivia, still lost in thought about their brief interaction, didn't notice the calculating look in Victoria's eyes. "There's something different about that young man, don't you think?" Victoria mused casually. Her tone was unreadable, but it sent a chill down Olivia's spine. "Why the sudden interest, Victoria?" "Just minutes ago, you told me to ignore him completely," Olivia said, suspicion creeping into her voice. When they arrived at the grand estate, Victoria stormed through the front doors, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Olivia followed in silence, still unsettled by the day's events. Hearing their arrival, Robert stepped out of his office, concern etched on his face. Victoria wasted no time with pleasantries. "Robert, your daughter is out of control. Today, she nearly mingled with beggars on the street," she spat, her voice heavy with disdain. "Beggars?" Robert's brows furrowed as he turned to Olivia, his face a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "Olivia, is this true?" he asked, his voice weary. "Father, I was just trying to help someone in need. I don't see how that could possibly be wrong," Olivia said, her voice shaky but unwavering in her conviction. Victoria seized Robert's arm and pulled him into his office, slamming the door behind them, leaving Olivia outside. The muffled sounds of their argument seeped through the thick wooden door. "Don't you see the danger here, Robert? She's ruining our reputation by associating with the lowest of society." Olivia stood outside, her fists clenched. She had no idea what Victoria was planning, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let her stepmother decide what was right and wrong for her. Victoria gestured wildly, her sharp gaze burning with frustration. Across from her, Robert sank into his leather chair, rubbing his temples in exhaustion. "Victoria, she has a kind heart. We can't punish her for that," he said, his voice weary. "A kind heart?" Victoria scoffed, her tone cutting like a blade. "In this world, a kind heart is a weakness we cannot afford." The argument intensified as Victoria listed all of Olivia's so-called offenses over the past few months. Donating money without approval, volunteering in underprivileged areas, refusing to attend high society gatherings. Robert listened, his face growing paler with every accusation. "She's destroying everything we've built, Robert. Our reputation, our social connections, everything is at risk because of this. This obsession she has with helping those beneath us," Victoria hissed, her voice low but seething with anger. "But she's my daughter, Victoria. I can't just change who she is," Robert argued, though his tone already carried a hint of surrender. Victoria suddenly stopped pacing. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips as a new thought took shape in her mind. "I have a plan," she declared, her voice disturbingly calm. "A plan that will solve two problems at once." Robert straightened in his chair, suddenly uneasy. He recognized that tone. It rarely meant anything good. "What kind of plan?" he asked cautiously. Victoria's cold smile widened. "A plan that will teach Olivia a lesson." A heavy silence filled the office. Robert studied Victoria, a mixture of fear and unease settling in his chest. He should protest. He should defend his daughter. But years under Victoria's control had chipped away at his resistance. "What exactly are you thinking?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a calculating light. "That beggar Olivia was so desperate to help," she mused, her voice laced with malice. "What if we use him to show her the truth? To make her see firsthand that people like him are not as good as they seem? What if she learns the hard way just how dangerous they can be?" Robert's stomach twisted. He stared at his wife, horrified by the sinister edge in her voice. "Victoria, what exactly are you suggesting?" he asked, dreading the answer. Robert's stomach churned with unease as he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria, what exactly are you suggesting?" A shiver ran down his spine. Victoria abruptly rose from her chair, her shadow looming over him as she walked toward the office window. She gazed out at the immaculately maintained garden, a slow, calculating smile forming on her lips. "Marriage, Robert. We'll force Olivia to marry that beggar," she declared, her tone laced with cruel satisfaction. Robert choked on his whiskey, his eyes widening in shock. "You've lost your mind, Victoria. That's monstrous." He shot up from his chair, his face pale with disbelief. "Monstrous?" Victoria turned to face him, her expression unwavering. "No, Robert, it's a necessary lesson. What better way to make Olivia see the harsh truth than by forcing her to live with someone like him?" Her voice was cold, every word precise and deliberate. Robert ran a hand through his graying hair, pacing anxiously across the office. But what about her happiness? She deserves more than this, Victoria," he argued, desperation creeping into his voice. Victoria's eyes gleamed with unwavering determination. "Happiness?" she scoffed. "Think about what's at stake. Imagine the whispers, the judgment at social gatherings. Olivia needs to understand the consequences of her reckless choices," she said, her words carrying an almost rehearsed conviction. "This doesn't feel right, Victoria. Olivia isn't ashamed of people with less. She has a good heart. This won't break her. It won't change who she is," Robert countered, his voice tinged with rare pride. Victoria let out a low, humorless laugh that echoed through the office. "Oh, Robert, do you really believe that?" She shook her head, amusement flickering in her cold stare. "She may be kind, but she's still a girl raised in luxury. A few days living in squalor with that man, and she'll beg to come to her senses." She dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. Robert leaned against his desk, his shoulders slumped under the weight of her words. His mind reeled with conflicting emotions, his love for Olivia clashing with the pressure Victoria wielded over him. "And the young man?" he asked hesitantly. "How do you expect to convince him to go along with this?" Victoria smirked, her confidence unwavering. Simple. Money. We'll offer him a sum he can't refuse. For someone like him, it'll be an offer of a lifetime." A heavy silence settled between them. Robert stared blankly at the floor, his thoughts a tangled mess of guilt, fear, and reluctant acceptance. The idea of manipulating his own daughter into such a cruel scheme sickened him, but the weight of social consequences loomed over him like a storm. I don't know, Victoria. This is too far. Can't we just talk to her?" His voice was hollow, filled with doubt. Victoria stepped closer, her tone softening but still firm. "Robert, words aren't enough. Olivia needs to see for herself. Sometimes we have to be harsh to protect those we love." She placed a hand on his arm, her voice a mix of persuasion and feigned concern. Robert swallowed hard. "But forcing a marriage? Playing with my daughter's life like this?" He hesitated, shaking his head. There must be another way. He walked slowly to the window, staring out at the world beyond, the very world he had spent years shielding Olivia from. His heart ached at the thought of trapping her in such a cruel game. With a deep sigh, he turned back to Victoria, his eyes filled with an unsettling certainty. "This won't end well, Victoria." "You're underestimating Olivia and the strength of her convictions," he murmured, his voice carrying a warning she refused to hear. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line, irritation flashing in her gaze. She had no patience for Robert's doubts. The plan was already set in motion. Olivia would learn her lesson, one way or another. Victoria crossed her arms, frustration flashing in her eyes. "Your hesitation is exactly why Olivia is out of control, Robert," she snapped. "Sometimes we have to make difficult choices. You're her father. You need to teach her to protect her reputation." Her voice was sharp, unwavering. Meanwhile, the sun was setting over the city park, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the sky. Ethan sat on a worn-out bench, watching people rush past, lost in their own worlds. Then, an elegant figure approached. Victoria, draped in a designer coat and walking with an air of superiority, looked out of place in this part of the city. She stopped in front of Ethan, her cold eyes scanning him from head to toe with thinly veiled disdain. "You're the one who was here earlier, aren't you?" she said, her voice carefully measured. "I'm Victoria, Olivia's stepmother, the woman who helped you today. She was with me." Ethan stood up, a mix of confusion and guarded suspicion in his expression. His voice, rough from lack of use, carried a cautious edge. "Yeah, that's me. My name's Ethan. What do you want, ma'am?" Victoria's lips curled into a calculating smile. "I have a proposal for you. One that could completely change your life." Without hesitation, she got to the point. She outlined her plan, speaking with precision. An arranged marriage with Olivia in exchange for a life of comfort and security. Ethan's eyes widened as he listened, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're asking me to marry your stepdaughter? The same woman who showed me kindness today?" His voice was laced with disbelief. "For money?" Victoria nodded, her expression unreadable. "Think about it, Ethan. You'd never have to worry about food or shelter again. Everything you've ever wanted, security, stability, it could be yours," she said smoothly, her words as enticing as a serpent's whisper. Ethan shook his head immediately. "I can't do that. I won't use someone like that, especially not her," he said firmly, his conscience rejecting the idea outright. A flicker of irritation crossed Victoria's face, but she quickly masked it, shifting her strategy. "Think bigger, Ethan," she coaxed, lowering her voice. "With this money, you wouldn't just be helping yourself. You could help others, your friends on the streets, the ones who go hungry every day. Imagine what you could do for them." Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists as conflicting thoughts battled in his mind. The image of his street companions, cold, hungry, desperate, flashed before him. I could really make a difference," he murmured, more to himself than to Victoria. Victoria seized on his hesitation. Exactly. Isn't that what Olivia would do? Use her resources to help others? This is your chance to change lives, Ethan, she pressed, her voice dripping with persuasion. As Ethan wrestled with the decision, his gaze drifted to the gold brooch pinned to Victoria's coat. It was an intricate design, a rose entwined with vines. Something about it struck him, a distant memory stirring in the back of his mind. He reached out slightly, almost touching it. "This brooch? I've seen it before," he murmured, his voice trembling with unexpected emotion. Victoria took a step back, momentarily thrown off by his reaction. She quickly composed herself, her fingers instinctively moving to cover the brooch. "It's just an old family heirloom," she said briskly. "Nothing important." But Ethan wasn't convinced. Why does it feel so familiar? His mind scrambled through hazy childhood memories, snippets of a woman, her voice soft as she hummed a tune. He shook his head, unable to grasp the full picture. Victoria, sensing the moment slipping, straightened and gestured for him to follow. "Shall we go? I'm sure you'll make the right choice, Ethan." Ethan hesitated before finally nodding. Before leaving, he turned to the familiar faces around him, his companions, his makeshift family on the streets. "Don't worry," he promised, his voice steady. "I'll be back. I'll find a way to help all of you." Then, without another word, he followed Victoria into the unknown. Ethan's voice caught in his throat, thick with emotion. Seated inside the sleek vehicle, the scent of new leather filling his senses, he couldn't shake the strange familiarity of Victoria's brooch or the surreal proposal she had just made. His mind raced with doubts and questions. "Am I doing the right thing?" he wondered, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. "But if this can help others, maybe it's worth it." Minutes later, Victoria's luxury car glided smoothly through the mansion gates, coming to a silent stop before the grand estate. From the back seat, Ethan stared in awe at the towering structure, its sheer size and elegance, unlike anything he had ever known. Upstairs, Olivia sat by her bedroom window, lost in the pages of a book, when the sound of an approaching vehicle caught her attention. Glancing outside, she froze, her eyes widening in shock. There, stepping out of Victoria's car, was Ethan, looking hesitant, out of place in his worn clothes. Her stomach twisted. What is he doing here? Why would Victoria bring him? A deep sense of unease gripped her. Did she do something to him? She whispered to herself, apprehension building in her chest. Downstairs, Victoria led Ethan inside, pausing briefly to glance up at Olivia's window, where she knew her stepdaughter was watching. The look in her eyes was deliberate, almost taunting. "Wait here," she instructed Ethan coolly, before ascending the grand staircase with a determined stride. At Olivia's door, Victoria didn't bother waiting for permission before stepping inside. "Olivia, dear, we need to talk," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Olivia turned slowly to face her stepmother, her expression an uneasy mix of confusion and dread. "Victoria? What's going on? Why is that man here?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Victoria's smile was composed, her tone reassuring, but there was something unnerving about her calmness. "Everything will become clear soon, my dear. But first, sit down. We have a lot to discuss," she said smoothly, gesturing toward the edge of the bed. Reluctantly, Olivia complied, her wary gaze never leaving Victoria's face. The older woman began pacing the room, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor, each step echoing like a warning. "Olivia, your obsession with helping the less fortunate has been concerning," she began, her voice tinged with condescension. "Your father and I have decided that it's time for you to learn a valuable lesson about the real world." A cold knot formed in Olivia's stomach. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" she asked, her pulse quickening. Victoria finally stopped pacing and turned to face her directly, her expression unreadable. "I'm talking about consequences, dear," she said smoothly. "And a marriage." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. She shot up from the bed, her hands trembling. Marriage? What marriage? Her voice was rising, panic creeping in. Victoria's lips curled into a slow, satisfied smile. "You're going to marry the beggar downstairs," she declared, savoring each word. "Ethan, the man you were so eager to help today." The room seemed to spin. Olivia stared at her stepmother, unable to process what she had just heard. Victoria, enjoying the moment, watched as the color drained from Olivia's face. This was only the beginning. Olivia felt the color drain from her face. "This is insane! You can't be serious!" she shouted, her voice ringing through the room. Victoria remained unfazed, her expression calm and composed. "Oh, but I am, dear. Very serious," she replied smoothly. Then, leaning in slightly, her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And before you even think about refusing, let me explain what happens if you don't cooperate." Olivia staggered back, sinking heavily onto the bed as her mind reeled. The sheer absurdity of the situation made her head spin. "I only helped a man in need. What did I do that was so wrong?" Her voice cracked as her hands clenched into fists. "You can't force me into this. It's illegal. It's immoral," she argued, her eyes welling with frustrated tears. Victoria stepped closer, lowering herself to Olivia's level so their faces were nearly touching. "Oh, but I can. And I will," she said with a chilling certainty. "Unless, of course, you'd rather see your new beggar friend face some serious charges. It would be such a shame if the authorities were to find something illegal in his possession. Don't you think?" Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She stared at Victoria, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You wouldn't," she whispered, barely able to get the words out. "He's innocent. He has nothing to do with this." Victoria tilted her head, her cold smile never faltering. "But does that really matter?" she mused. "People believe what they're told, Olivia. A simple suggestion from the right person, and well, let's just say the police might not be so forgiving." Olivia's stomach twisted with nausea. "Why are you doing this, Victoria? What do you gain from this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Victoria straightened, smoothing the fabric of her sleeve as if the conversation bored her. "What do I gain?" She let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "A daughter-in-law who finally understands her place. A girl who learns that the world isn't all kindness and charity. And most importantly, someone who finally realizes that not everyone you try to save is worthy of your compassion." Olivia felt trapped. Her gaze darted to the window, the very same one where she had seen Ethan arrive just moments earlier. The thought of him being used as a pawn, suffering because of her, was unbearable. Her voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "And if I accept, what happens to Ethan?" Victoria's smile softened, but her eyes remained as cold as ever. "He'll have a comfortable life, far from the streets, well taken care of. And you, my dear, will finally learn a valuable lesson about the real world," she said, her tone almost motherly, if not for the icy detachment underneath. Downstairs, Ethan was led into an ornate bathroom connected to his new room. He hesitated at the doorway, his breath catching at the sight before him. A massive marble bathtub sat in the center, the polished surfaces gleaming under the soft lighting. Plush towels were stacked neatly on the counter, along with an array of soaps and shaving products he had only ever seen in store windows. "Everything you need is here," the butler said, motioning to the luxuries as if they were nothing special. Ethan nodded numbly, still overwhelmed by the surreal turn his life had taken. Once alone, he approached the faucet, twisting the knobs and watching as hot water filled the tub. Steam curled into the air, the warmth beckoning him closer. "How long has it been since I had a real bath?" he wondered, peeling off his tattered clothes. He glanced down at himself, the grime, the worn skin, the scars that told stories no one ever asked about. Will all this dirt even come off? He hesitated, his fingers brushing against the water's surface before finally stepping in. The sensation hit him all at once. A shuddering sigh escaped his lips as the warmth wrapped around him, the heat seeping into his aching bones. He reached for a sponge, scrubbing away layers of dirt and exhaustion, letting the scented soap lather over his skin. Tilting his head back, he submerged himself fully, letting the water drown out the noise of the world. As he resurfaced, he ran his hands through his hair, washing it over and over again, watching the water darken. The murky swirl was a silent testament to the years he had spent on the streets. Ethan remained in the bath until the water cooled, savoring the rare moment of comfort. When he finally stood and reached for a fresh towel, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. His skin, clean, free of dirt for the first time in years, looked almost unfamiliar. "It's like being reborn," he whispered, staring at himself. Who would have thought that something as simple as a bath could make a man feel human again? A strange wave of emotion surged through him, tightening his throat. He swallowed it down, gripping the towel and wrapping it around himself. For the first time in a long while, he felt different. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a new life. It was a new cage. Ethan stared at his reflection in the foggy mirror, barely recognizing the man looking back at him. His beard was thick and unkempt, hiding much of his face, a reminder of the years spent surviving on the streets. With trembling hands, he picked up the razor and shaving cream. He hesitated for a moment before carefully dragging the blade across his skin. Each stroke didn't just remove hair, it stripped away layers of the life he had known. By the time he was finished, he ran a hand over his now smooth cheeks, staring in disbelief. "Is that really me?" he murmured. It felt as though he was looking at a stranger, someone from a past he had long since forgotten. A mix of shock and fascination settled over him as he tried to process the transformation. Dressed in the fresh clothes left for him, Ethan felt out of place. The fabric was soft, perfectly tailored, nothing like the rough, tattered garments he was used to. He adjusted the collar, feeling uncomfortable in something so pristine. Taking one last deep breath, he looked at himself in the mirror, bracing himself for what was to come. "You can do this. With a life like this, you'll be able to help so many others." He whispered the words, trying to convince himself. As he descended the grand staircase, he felt the weight of every step. The air in the mansion felt suffocating, heavy with expectation. At the bottom of the stairs, Olivia stood frozen, her breath catching when she saw him. Her wide eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Ethan, I almost didn't recognize you," she whispered, her voice a mixture of surprise and something else, something he couldn't quite decipher. Victoria appeared, her sharp gaze sweeping over Ethan before she gave a slow, almost mocking nod of approval. "Ah, excellent. You clean up well, at least," she remarked, her tone falsely pleasant. Ethan simply nodded, unable to find the right words. As they moved toward the dining room, he noticed Olivia still watching him, her expression unreadable. What is she thinking? Ethan wondered, feeling more exposed than he ever had, even in the harshest days on the streets. Why is she looking at me like that? The days blurred together in a whirlwind of preparations and unspoken tension. Now, seated in an opulent beauty salon, Olivia stared at her reflection as the hairstylist worked on her intricate bridal hairstyle. The mirror reflected an image of elegance, but behind the composed exterior, her eyes held quiet determination. Her fingers rested lightly on the delicate white dress in her lap as her thoughts drifted to Ethan, to the drastic changes he had undergone in the past few days. He must be feeling just as lost as I am. A thought flickered through her mind, bringing a sense of purpose. Maybe this marriage is an opportunity. Maybe I can truly help him. Maybe I can make a difference. A small, almost imperceptible smile formed on her lips. The hairstylist, noticing Olivia's thoughtful expression, attempted to lighten the mood. "Are you excited for the big day, miss?" she asked gently. Olivia hesitated before answering, carefully choosing her words. "It's complicated," she admitted, "but I'm determined to make the best of the situation." Her reflection met the hairstylist's gaze in the mirror, but her mind was elsewhere, lingering on the moments she had shared with Ethan. The brief conversations, the hesitant smiles, the silent gratitude in his eyes. He deserved a chance to rebuild his life. Maybe together we can find a greater purpose in all of this. As the stylist put the finishing touches on her hair, Olivia's gaze drifted across the salon. Outside these walls, there were so many who needed help, just as Ethan once had. A plan was beginning to take shape in her mind. If I have to go through with this, then I will use this position, this privilege, to create real change. The hairstylist's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you satisfied with the result, miss?" Olivia blinked, taking in her finished look. She smiled, a genuine, knowing smile. "It's perfect. Thank you," she said softly. This wasn't just the start of a marriage. It was the beginning of something far greater. As that sense of determination settled over her, Olivia caught a whisper of conversation from two nearby staff members. "That's Victoria's stepdaughter," one murmured. "Do you remember the scandal with her stepmother?" the other whispered back, leaning in closer. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly around the fabric of her dress. How could I forget, she thought. But she wouldn't let the past define her. Not anymore. They say she was involved in something terrible. They never proved anything, of course, one of the staff members whispered. The hushed conversation came to an abrupt halt when the women noticed Olivia watching them through the mirror. Their faces paled, and they quickly backed away, guilt evident in their hurried movements. Olivia's pulse quickened. Something terrible? What was Victoria involved in? Her mind raced with questions, doubts swirling like a storm. She claims she was happy to join our family, yet she treats me like an inconvenience, like an enemy. The staff member's words echoed in her mind, blending with memories, Victoria's evasions, the unanswered questions about her past before she married Robert. There's something she's hiding. Determination settled in Olivia's chest like a burning ember. She walked to the salon window, staring at her own reflection in the glass. She wasn't just looking at a bride, she was looking at a woman with a purpose. I'm going to find out the truth. If Victoria is hiding something, I'll uncover it. Her jaw tightened, her eyes steeling with resolve. Hours later, the late afternoon sun cast golden hues over the towering facade of the church as a procession of luxury cars began to arrive. Ethan stood at the entrance, dressed in a finely tailored suit that felt foreign on his skin. The crisp fabric and polished shoes were a stark contrast to what he had worn just days ago. Despite the elegant disguise, he felt painfully out of place. From the polished vehicles, men and women of high society stepped out, their expensive attire glistening under the sunlight. Their gazes drifted toward him, curious and judgmental. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Words like beggar and scandal floated through the air, stinging like needles. Ethan swallowed hard, his stomach twisting. How did I end up here? Why do they look at me like I'm something rotten? Does Olivia see me the way they do? He exhaled sharply, adjusting his tie for what felt like the 100th time, his fingers shaking slightly. His eyes darted around, searching for a familiar, reassuring face. None came. An elderly couple passed by, the woman wrinkling her nose, as if the very sight of him was offensive. Did you hear? Victoria said he was living on the streets just last week, she whispered, her voice dripping with disdain. What a disgrace for poor Olivia. The man beside her nodded solemnly, casting Ethan a look of distaste. They say it's some sort of punishment, but to expose the family like this, forcing Olivia to associate with people like him? He shook his head. She must have lost her mind. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Punishment? Humiliation? The words slammed into him like a physical blow. His mind reeled as realization sank in. Victoria had orchestrated this. She had spread his story, ensuring he became nothing more than a spectacle. His presence at this wedding, a tool to shame Olivia in front of her entire world. So that's it. I'm not here because I was given a chance. I'm here to be a lesson, a weapon, a joke. Anger and humiliation tangled in his chest, a burning sensation spreading through him. More guests arrived, their stares stripping away the last remnants of dignity he had tried to hold on to. Every whisper, every sneer chipped away at him. Then, from across the courtyard, he spotted her. Victoria. She was greeting guests with an effortless smile, exchanging pleasantries with the ease of a seasoned performer. But every so often, her gaze flickered in his direction, smug satisfaction glinting in her eyes. She was enjoying this. Ethan clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms, as he fought the urge to storm over and demand answers, to call out her cruelty in front of everyone. But before he could act, a gentle hand landed on his shoulder. Startled, he turned. Robert stood beside him, his expression heavy with something Ethan couldn't quite place: regret, pity, or perhaps guilt. For the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan saw someone who knew the truth. But would he do anything about it? Ethan, I'm sorry for all of this, Robert murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Ethan could respond, Robert had already turned away, disappearing into the sea of guests. Even her father is a victim in this twisted game, Ethan thought, his mind racing. As he tried to make sense of it all, an elderly gentleman, leaning on an ornate cane, approached him. The moment their eyes met, the older man's expression shifted, shock and recognition flickering across his wrinkled face. "It can't be," the man muttered, studying Ethan's features with wide eyes. For a brief second, hope flared in Ethan's chest. Was this someone who wouldn't judge him? But before Ethan could speak, the elderly man glanced around, his movements suddenly cautious, as if afraid of being watched. Leaning in closer, he whispered, his voice trembling with urgency. "Young man, I need to speak with you immediately. In private." Ethan blinked in confusion. "Of course, sir. But why? Is something wrong?" His voice was low, unsure. The man's gaze darted nervously around the room again. "Not here," he whispered. "Meet me behind the church in 5 minutes. There are things you need to know." And with that, he turned, moving away as quickly as his cane would allow. Ethan stood frozen, his heartbeat accelerating. The pieces are coming together, but what kind of picture are they forming? Shortly after his mysterious conversation with the old man, Ethan returned inside the church, his mind swirling with everything he had just learned. The atmosphere was heavy with tension as guests settled into their seats, their hushed whispers filling the air. Standing at the altar, Ethan could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. The weight of the revelations pressed down on him, but he forced himself to stay composed. He had to go through with this, for Olivia's sake. The Reverend glanced at him with concern. "Are you all right, young man?" he whispered. Ethan only nodded, his jaw tightening. "I need to stay strong. Olivia deserves to know the truth. But not like this. Not here. I won't abandon her at the altar." "Everything's fine, Reverend," Ethan finally replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. And then, the music began. All heads turned toward the entrance as Olivia appeared, radiant in her wedding gown. But despite her elegance, her eyes betrayed her inner turmoil, a mixture of fear and determination. Ethan swallowed hard as he watched her approach. Each step she took felt deliberate, as if she were marching toward an uncertain fate. Seated in the front row, Victoria watched with satisfaction, her lips curving into a pleased smile. But to Ethan, that smile now looked sinister. If she knew what I know now, if she only knew how everything will change when the truth comes out. When Olivia finally reached the altar, her eyes met Ethan's. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. A silent understanding passed between them. Two souls caught in a storm, bound together by something neither of them had chosen. The Reverend's voice filled the church, but to Ethan, the words felt distant, drowned out by the weight of the secret he carried. "Hold on, Ethan. Everything will be revealed at the right moment." The ceremony continued, each word increasing the tension in the air. Then came the moment. "If anyone has any reason why this marriage should not take place, speak now or forever hold your peace," the Reverend announced. A thick silence fell over the church. Ethan's entire body tensed. The truth burned in his throat, desperate to be spoken. He wanted to say something, needed to say something, but he couldn't. Not yet. Then, in an instant, the moment shattered. Victoria abruptly stood, the sound of her chair scraping against the floor like a dagger through the silence. "I have something to say," she declared, her voice slicing through the room like a blade. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. His eyes widened. What is she doing? Does she know what I've discovered? Panic tightened around his chest as Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The entire church sat in stunned silence as she slowly made her way down the aisle, her movements deliberate, her expression unreadable, except for the gleam of something cruel in her eyes. Then she turned to face the guests standing beside the altar. She smiled. It was a smile drenched in venom. "Dear guests," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. And Ethan knew, whatever she was about to say, it would change everything. "I believe everyone here deserves to know the truth about this wedding," Victoria declared, her voice echoing through the hushed church. Her gaze landed on Olivia, who stood frozen at the altar, her face pale with shock. "This young woman," Victoria continued, pointing at the bride with a slow, deliberate gesture, "thought she could defy the rules of our society. She believed she could disregard her place, mingling with the filth of the streets." She sneered, pausing for dramatic effect. "Well, my dear guests, this is the result of her foolish compassion." A ripple of murmurs spread through the pews as guests exchanged shocked glances, their whispers laced with disapproval. Olivia felt the sting of tears forming, but she refused to let them fall. "Victoria, please," she whispered, her voice barely steady, trembling with emotion. "Don't do this." Victoria tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "It's far too late for please, dear," she replied, her tone razor-sharp. "You made this choice. Now, you must live with the consequences." Turning back to the congregation, Victoria spread her arms theatrically. "Look at this, my friends. This is the bride who chose to marry a beggar, a man who, until last week, was sleeping on the streets, filthy, starving, a nobody." Gasps rippled through the church. Disapproving murmurs grew louder. Ethan stood still, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, anger simmering beneath his skin. Victoria continued, her voice brimming with cold satisfaction. "This is what happens when someone forgets their place, when they refuse to respect the traditions and expectations of our society." The tension in the church was suffocating. Then, finally, Robert stood. "Victoria, enough," he commanded, his voice shaking with barely contained outrage. "How dare you do this to my daughter?" Victoria turned to him with an icy smile. "Your daughter," she mocked, laughing coldly. "She chose this, Robert, and now she must face the consequences." Olivia's face burned with humiliation, but something inside her shifted. A spark ignited in her eyes. A spark of defiance. She stepped forward, ready to confront Victoria, to end this public humiliation once and for all. But before she could open her mouth, Ethan moved. He stepped in front of her, placing himself between Olivia and Victoria, his presence commanding. His eyes blazed with a fury that silenced the entire room. "Enough," he said. His voice was low, firm, unshakable. "Enough of your lies, Victoria." The church seemed to hold its breath. Victoria took a slight step back, momentarily thrown off by Ethan's sudden defiance. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her control beginning to waver. Ethan didn't blink. He met her cold gaze head on, his expression unrelenting. "I'm telling the truth," he said, his voice steady. "The truth you've spent years hiding." The air in the church grew thick with anticipation. Every pair of eyes was locked on Ethan as he took a single step forward, closing the distance between him and Victoria. A deep breath, a moment of stillness, and then he spoke. Ethan's voice was firm and unwavering, echoing through the grand walls of the church. "The time for truth has come, Victoria," he declared, his piercing gaze locked onto her. "You thought you could bury the past, but no matter how deep you hide it, the truth always finds a way to surface." The air in the church was thick with tension, guests frozen in shock as Ethan took a steady breath and continued. "My real name is Hudson Howard," he revealed, the name foreign, yet oddly familiar on his tongue. "It feels strange to say, after all these years of being known only by the name I was given on the streets. But that was the name I was baptized with. That is who I am." A ripple of murmurs spread through the congregation. Olivia, standing beside him, looked as if the ground beneath her had vanished. "I am the son of Jonathan Howard, Victoria's first husband," Ethan continued, his words sending a fresh wave of shock through the room. "A few minutes ago, an elderly man approached me. He told me a story, one I couldn't remember but somehow felt deep in my bones." The church was silent. Not a breath, not a movement. "He spoke of a child, the son of a wealthy man, a boy who mysteriously vanished years ago. That child was me." Gasps echoed through the pews. Victoria's grip on her shawl tightened, her face unreadable, but Ethan saw the slight tremor in her fingers. "He recognized me," Ethan pressed on. "Not just by my face, but by the birthmark I bear. The same birthmark that was once seen on Jonathan Howard's son, before he disappeared." His voice hardened. "But when that man heard of my life on the streets, he connected the dots." Ethan took a step forward, his voice now laced with steel. "Victoria, you were my father's second wife. When he died under mysterious circumstances, you inherited everything. But that wasn't enough for you, was it?" His eyes narrowed. "I was an obstacle. I was the rightful heir. I threatened the fortune and the social standing you so desperately craved." Victoria's face remained impassive, but her knuckles turned white as she clutched the fabric of her dress. "So, you removed me," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You abandoned me in a distant town, erasing my existence from your carefully constructed life. I was too young to understand, too small to fight back. And when you fabricated a tragic story of my disappearance, everyone believed you." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy storm cloud. "For years, I wandered the streets, never knowing why I felt so lost. Why something always pulled me back to this city, as if, unconsciously, I knew I belonged here, even when I had no memory of why." Ethan's jaw tightened as he turned to Victoria, his voice lowering. "But one thing I did remember was your brooch." Victoria stiffened. "You wear it every day," Ethan said, his voice almost a whisper now, yet filled with quiet fury. "I remember holding it in my tiny hands as a child. It was the only thing I could cling to the day you left me. It was my last connection to the world I once knew. And yet, when you saw me again, when you brought me into your home, you didn't even recognize me." A cruel irony hung in the air, suffocating. "You despise beggars, Victoria," Ethan continued, shaking his head. "But do you know why? Because deep down, every time you look at one, you see me, the child you abandoned, the mistake you thought you erased. Every time you turned away from someone in need, it wasn't just disgust, it was guilt. The tension in the room was unbearable. Guests sat rigid, eyes flickering between Ethan and Victoria, watching the confrontation unfold like a play with no script. Victoria remained silent, but her chest rose and fell sharply. Ethan turned to Olivia then, his expression softening. She was staring at him, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with a whirlwind of emotions. "Olivia," he said gently, "your kindness, your compassion, you gave me the strength to face this truth. That day, when you helped me, you didn't just offer food or kindness. You gave me the courage to listen, to believe I was worthy of knowing who I really am." A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek, but she quickly wiped it away, standing taller. Ethan's voice hardened once more as he turned back to Victoria. "Your obsession with status, your disdain for the less fortunate, your cruelty disguised as wisdom. Now it all makes sense." He took another step forward. "It was all a facade, a way to bury your past, to erase what you did to me and to my father." Victoria finally opened her mouth, but no words came out. "But no more," Ethan declared. "The truth is here now, and you can't hide behind your lies any longer. It's time you answer for what you've done." A breathless silence filled the church. Ethan stood taller, his shoulders squaring as he looked out over the crowd. "I stand here today," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "Not as the broken man you thought you could use, not as the beggar you tried to humiliate, but as Ethan Howard, reclaiming my identity, reclaiming my place in the world." He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto Victoria's. "And I am here to make sure that justice is finally served." The room erupted into chaos, gasps, murmurs, exclamations. Guests turned to one another in disbelief. At the altar, Olivia stood frozen, her hands gripping the bouquet as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Victoria's face had gone pale. And in that moment, Ethan knew. Everything was about to change. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as the full weight of Ethan's revelation settled over her. Across the room, Victoria, pale, trembling, seemed to shrink beneath the crushing weight of the truth she had so desperately tried to bury. Robert took a slow step back from his wife, his face etched with shock and disbelief. It was as if, for the first time, he was truly seeing her. And he did not like what he saw. In the days following the dramatic revelation at the church, the lives of everyone involved changed forever. Determined to erase any lingering doubt about his identity, Ethan underwent a DNA test with a distant relative of the Howard family. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they waited for the results. On a bright afternoon, Ethan, Olivia, and Robert gathered in the office of the family's lawyer. The envelope containing the test results trembled slightly in the lawyer's hands as he carefully opened it. "It's positive," he announced, his voice breaking the silence like a thunderclap. Ethan was without a doubt the long-lost son of Jonathan Howard. A choked sob of relief escaped Olivia as she squeezed Ethan's hand, her eyes shining with emotion. Robert, still struggling to process everything, placed a firm but reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Finally," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "After all these years, the truth has come to light." He exhaled slowly. "It's good to finally see, to remove the blindfold, and know that, despite everything, happiness is still possible." For Victoria, the consequences were swift and severe. Accused of fraud, manipulation, and, possibly, even playing a role in Jonathan Howard's mysterious death, she found herself ensnared in a grueling legal battle. Days later, police arrived at the mansion with a search and seizure warrant. Victoria, still in shock, could do nothing but watch helplessly as officers scoured every room, confiscating documents, computers, and even her prized brooch, which had now become evidence. Prosecutors, eager to hold someone of her social stature accountable, launched a full-scale investigation into Jonathan's death, which had long been ruled an accident. But now, new suspicions surfaced. The very circles that once embraced her, the elite socialites who had praised her, dined with her, envied her, turned their backs. She was no longer untouchable. Her world collapsed overnight. The invitations to exclusive dinners and charity galas vanished. Her phone stopped ringing. Friends who once hung on her every word now crossed the street to avoid being seen with her. Worse still, her accounts were frozen, leaving her without access to the vast wealth she once took for granted. The mansion she had once ruled over now felt like a prison, its grandeur suffocating. Outside, reporters swarmed, desperate to capture a glimpse of the fallen queen of high society. And in the cruelest twist of fate, Victoria, who had spent a lifetime turning her back on those she deemed beneath her, now found herself utterly alone. For the first time, she tasted a fraction of the isolation and despair she had inflicted on Ethan all those years ago. As more damning evidence emerged and her manipulations were laid bare, one thing became clear: Victoria wasn't just facing social ruin. She was facing prison. Meanwhile, Ethan and Olivia grew even closer, their bond strengthened by the storm they had weathered together. In a simple, yet deeply meaningful ceremony, nothing like the spectacle Victoria had once tried to orchestrate, they were married. This time, there were no hidden motives, no manipulation, just love. Pure, real, and unshaken by the past. As they stood together, hand in hand, Olivia looked up at Ethan, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "Ethan," she said, squeezing his fingers gently, "what do you think about using our combined fortunes to help people, the way you once needed help?" Ethan's eyes softened, filled with both emotion and purpose. "Nothing," he said, his voice steady, "would make me happier." In the months that followed, Ethan and Olivia dedicated themselves to a cause greater than themselves. Together, they founded a charitable organization aimed at helping the homeless and abandoned children, those who had been left behind, just as Ethan once was. They built shelters, they provided education, they created opportunities for people whom society had all but forgotten. Robert, weighed down with guilt over his years of blindness to Victoria's schemes, threw himself into their mission, working tirelessly alongside them. Ethan's story, his rise from the streets, his rediscovery of his identity, and his commitment to giving back, captured the hearts of many. He became a symbol of hope, a reminder that no matter how cruel the world may be, redemption is always possible. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan and Olivia sat together on their porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. He glanced at her, admiration in his gaze. "Do you think we've done enough?" he asked softly. Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder, a peaceful smile playing on her lips. "There's always more to do," she murmured. "But we've started, and that's what matters." Ethan exhaled, his heart full. After years of searching, of struggling, of fighting for the truth, he had finally found his place, and for the first time in a long, long time, he was home. Ethan turned to Olivia, his expression soft, yet filled with emotion. "You know, for years I felt lost, like I was searching for something I couldn't name," he admitted. "Now, I realize I was searching for this, a home, a purpose, someone to love." Olivia smiled and nestled closer to him, her warmth a comforting presence. "And to think," she murmured, "it all started with a simple act of kindness on the street." She looked up at him. "Never underestimate the power of helping someone, Ethan. It can change the world." And so, what had begun as a cruel plot of manipulation and revenge transformed into something far greater. A story of love, redemption, and hope. United by the adversity they had faced, Ethan and Olivia dedicated their lives to turning past pain into a brighter future for others. Together, they founded the Howard Harrison Foundation, an organization committed to making a real difference in the world. Shelters for the homeless were established, not just providing a roof over their heads, but offering rehabilitation programs, job training, and the resources needed to help people rebuild their lives. Children who had been abandoned, just as Ethan once was, found safety, care, and love through a carefully supervised adoption program. Each year, dozens of young people received scholarships, giving them a chance to escape the cycle of poverty that Ethan knew all too well. Their work created ripples of change. Inspired by Ethan and Olivia's example, other wealthy families began reevaluating their own priorities, shifting their focus from excess to impact. The city, once known for its cold and indifferent elite, became a beacon of compassion and social progress. Ethan, the lost boy who had once wandered the streets, became a symbol of resilience. He frequently spoke at schools and universities, sharing his journey and encouraging others to never give up hope. Olivia, in turn, used her social influence to raise awareness and rally support for causes that had once been ignored by high society. Together, they proved that a person's true worth isn't measured by wealth or status, but by their ability to lift others up. Their story became a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness can prevail, and that a single act of compassion can spark profound change. As the years passed, Ethan and Olivia often looked back in awe at the journey that had brought them to where they were. What had begun with a small moment of generosity on a busy street had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A movement that changed lives. They continued their work, tireless in their determination to make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. Because in the end, love and compassion have the power to overcome even the deepest darkness. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you more heartwarming stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We're incredibly grateful to have you with us. Now, click on one of the links on your screen for a hand-picked selection of stories, guaranteed to inspire and entertain. See you there.